All right, guys, welcome back to Falcon Central Radio on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman, joined by my co-host, Scott Karasik. We are back this week to talk about the Falcons' Week 3 win over the Detroit Lions. We're going to preview their upcoming matchup against the Buffalo Bills in Week 4, and we will be answering all your guys' mailbag questions throughout the show and towards the end of the show. As we often do on this show, we kick things off talking a little bit of the roster moves, getting our thoughts on any of the sort of minor roster moves that the Falcons tend to make during the week. And they have made some moves. Since last Tuesday when we did the show, the Falcons added Joe Villano to from the practice squad to the roster. He actually played last week against Detroit. In order to make room for Joe Villano, they cut cornerback Deji Olatoye. They've also this past week picked up and re-signed Reggie Davis. I was about to call him Reginald. Reggie Davis, the good Reggie Davis, the wide receiver, to their practice.
From Georgia.
Yeah. And they also tried out a bunch of players, and maybe we'll get some thoughts on sort of if any of those guys jump out. But, Scott, I guess, the Villano move, makes sense. They needed some D-tackle depth, given Courtney Upshaw's departure. We did get a mailbag question from Bruce Luan, Big Boy Brewski on Twitter. He asked, why do you think they brought back Reggie Davis? Could he replace Nick Williams or be used until Jones comes back?
It'd be nice if Reggie Davis would come in and replace Nick Williams, but I think Jones is fine. I think Julio is going to be perfectly fine. So I'm not too worried about that. I'm more worried about Reggie Davis being I'm more worried about if Nick Williams ends up getting injured or if one of these guys ends up getting injured and they bring Reggie Davis in, what he could actually do.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, I think Reggie Davis, he's a project. I know he made some plays this preseason, but he's really, he barely was used at Georgia. He made some plays, certainly has speed and athleticism, but I don't expect the Falcons to really expect him to really play a significant role, even if we get further along in the season and they wind up bringing him up from the practice squad, on offense at least, potentially on special teams maybe. But, I think he'll be a nice developmental piece that the Falcons, if he winds up sticking on the Falcons practice squad for the rest of the season, they can carry into 2018 and see what they have, and maybe he'll push for that 5th or 6th wide receiver spot then. I think that, those moves. I was a little disappointed to see the team cut Deji Olatoye. I thought he was probably their most reliable backup corner besides Brian Poole. And, I guess the issue with him was he doesn't play a whole lot of special teams. So they have Bleedy Ray Wilson, I guess, to potentially fill that spot. We'll see if they need any more cornerback depth later in the season, and then whether or not Deji will wind up coming back. But we'll see how that goes. And, I think looking at the practice players, for the people that didn't know, the Falcons tried out cornerbacks Alex Carter and Dijon Smith, safety Chris Prosinski, a bunch of linebackers, none of whom I'd really ever heard of, and a running back named Josh Rounds. Any of those tryouts stand out to you, Scott? Any of those guys that a couple of years ago when they were coming into the league or something in the draft, did you like any of those guys or anything like that?
I mean, not really. DeJune Smith's probably the best out of the group, but I mean,
Okay. All right, let's get back into this Week 3 win over the Lions. Very dramatic win at the end. Came down to the final play, similar to the Week 1 win over the Bears. I guess every road game the Falcons play this year is going to come down to literally the last 10 seconds of the game. Obviously, a controversial finish. I'm sure most of you are aware of what happened at the end of that game. And, a 10-second runoff basically prevented Detroit from getting another opportunity to score from the half-yard line. Unfortunately for the Lions fans, but, obviously as Falcons, it's like, hey, someone's got to win. I thought some of the key stats from the game was the Falcons really were able to get their running game going. The running backs played really well. Devontae Freeman had his first 100-yard game, rushed for 106 yards, but him and Coleman combined for 227 yards from scrimmage when you factor in both rushing yards and passing yards, or receiving yards, I'm sorry. the Falcons turned the ball over 3 times, but they were able to survive the game because of that. I think the turnovers were probably the number one reason why the game was so close, and the Lions were able to sort of capitalize on that and generate 10 points off of those turnovers to really keep them in the game, probably when their offense on its own wasn't necessarily capable of doing that. The Lions were unable to convert in the red zone. The Falcons played a bend but don't break style. The Lions only converted one of their 3 red zone trips into touchdowns, including one of the 2 opportunities they had where it was at the very end of the game, and obviously that was the critical one where the Falcons got to stop. The Falcons were very stingy on third down. These 2 stats, the red zone and the third down defense, were 2 areas where the Falcons were very poor last year, and it was nice to see them play much better in those 2 areas this year. The Lions only converted 3 of 13 third downs. That actually was like the best defensive third down conversion percentage for the Falcons since their Week 15 game against the Jaguars in 2015. So they had gone 23 games really without allowing less than 25% conversion rate on third down. So, obviously another positive sign. What were some of the other things that stood out to you, Scott, from that Lions game?
The pass rush, I'd have to say. I know it didn't have Vic Beasley, but to me it didn't look like it was 2017 first 2 games when they were just knocking the crap out of everybody all the time. But it looked like it was at least 2016 caliber towards the middle and later in the year where they were getting a couple sacks, creating pressure, getting some hits. It was still a competent pass rush even without Vic Beasley. And just Grady Jarrett, that dude's a monster. That dude is everything that John Babineau was in his prime. Like, that dude was a monster. Just throwing around centers, throwing around guards, just run game, pass game, getting in the backfield all day long. I've never seen a guy work as hard as him all the time. And he looked great. I thought he did an awesome job. And I thought Grady Jarrett, him and Devontae Freeman probably were the game ball winners.
Definitely. Yeah, I thought a lot of players stood out. Not too many players struggled in this game. If I was going to say anybody, I would say, Desmond Trufant had the 2 penalties late in the game. I know people say that they were bad calls. I think they were the right calls. Deion Jones.
I think the holding was a bit ticky-tack, but I think the DPI was right.
Deion Jones got beat a little bit in man coverage towards the end by Amir Abdullah and Theo Riddick, but I think overall had a good game. But, that's going to be something that the Falcons are going to have to pay attention to the rest of the season, because so far through the first 3 games of the season, the running backs have been able to do some things against them in the passing game. I think playing Deion Jones in man coverage generally is good for them, but it is one of those things where I feel like they're going to be prone to giving up a couple of plays. And in that situation, at least against the Lions, where, I think it was Riddick that made the big catch on that last drive in the fourth quarter that sort of really helped them out, get down the field and whatnot. So that's something to keep an eye on. But I think overall, Deion Jones played very well. But I'm with you. I thought Devontae Freeman was amazing, as I mentioned earlier. I thought Tevin Coleman, despite a very small workload that he's getting currently this season, he's only getting about 8 to 10 touches a game, which is a big drop off from what it was last year when he was getting like 12 to 15, it seemed like. I think he made the most out of his touches this past week. I thought he looked more patient, more balanced as a runner than we've really seen him in quite some time. Obviously, we know Devontae is as patient and as quick and explosive a runner as you're going to get at that position. And maybe just a little bit of Devontae's patience and vision is starting to rub off now that Tevin Coleman's in his 3rd year. I thought Jake Matthews had one of his better games. It was a little bit of a redemption game. You go back to that London game a couple of years ago where he was a little nicked up. He was certainly nicked up in that game, but Ziggy Ansah really sort of tore him a new one in that game. And I think it was a good sign for Jake to show that he could, play with a pass rusher like Ziggy Ansah, who has that sort of freakish combination of length, size, speed, and power. And so those have always been the pass rushers that have been giving Jake the most problems this year. You saw Jake have that key block on Taylor Gabriel's screen touchdown. He has always been athletic and whatnot, but holding up strongly in the pass protection, I think it was certainly a positive step for Jake, and maybe he's starting to sort of round into that top 10-ish left tackle that we've been, talking about him having the potential to become. And maybe we're just seeing the beginning of that sort of solidify for him the rest of the season. So those were some of the positives I saw from the Falcons as well. All right, we got some mailbag questions involving this game. Luke at the Dirty Bird 1998 asked, is it just me or did Sark call a better game this week than last week?
It's not just you. I thought he called probably his best game as the Falcons coordinator this week. I know we've got a small sample size, but outside of the 3 interceptions by Matt Ryan, the offense was clicking perfectly. And it was just a matter of time until Matt Ryan threw a couple of interceptions. Yeah, I know 2 of them bounced off the receiver's hands. I'd argue the Tevin Coleman one's half him, half Coleman because he threw it a little high. I'd argue the Sanu one is honestly half him and half Coleman because that one was a little high. Or half him, half Sanu because that one was a little high. But, I mean, it was a great game called. I think if the Falcons execute the way that they're supposed to, it ends up being a lot better off. Like, I think if they execute right, it's probably a 45-20 or 45-17 type game, just a drubbing.
Yeah. I wouldn't go as far as saying that Matt Ryan was half responsible for the 2 picks to Coleman and Sanu. I think he was, the throw he threw to Coleman wasn't a great throw, but I think it was certainly a catchable pass. I would still blame Coleman primarily for that one. I think, the Sanu pick was pretty much all on Sanu. That was a pretty easy catchable pass. I could have got that pass. I think the turnovers, I think was a good sign that the Falcons were able to overcome the turnovers. I think, whether it was the better game start call, I guess, yeah. I mean, he stuck really to the play action. They ran like 38% of their passes were play action passes. They dialed up a lot of deep shots. Unfortunately, Ryan didn't hit a lot of them. He was overthrowing guys like Gabriel and Julio and whatnot a couple of times. So the Falcons couldn't really sort of capitalize. And I think, Scott, you're right that if he had hit some of those shots, in addition to sort of keeping the turnovers down, I think this could have easily been a 50 burger potentially against this Lions defense. So in that way, I guess, you can't blame Sark for Matt Ryan missing some throws. So I can see why you say that, Luke. So I guess I've convinced myself, sure, this was probably the best game he's called all year. So yeah.
Because that play where it was the pass to Hooper, if Matt Ryan puts it on the money, that's a touchdown. There's a couple of plays where it was going to Gabriel. And this could have easily been a 50 burger on the Lions if the Falcons just execute the way they can.
Yeah, definitely. All right, our next question comes from Evan Birchfield. He asks, who is this week's quote-unquote brother of the week? The segment I'll ask every week, the player who won't make headlines but did a lot for the team.
Andy Levitre.
You stole mine, Scott. Okay, so explain yours and I'll come up with somebody else.
That man need love too. Left guard is not going to get a lot of love ever, but Levitre has just been looking great as a run blocker this past week. He looked great on a couple of those screen blocks. His job on screen blocks isn't to get out there the way Matthews is. It's more to hold the pocket for as long as he can against 2 guys, and I think he's done a good job there. I loved watching Levitre block this week. Went back and watched the film. There's maybe 1 block on the entire game tape that I was like, oh, he didn't get that the way he could have. Every other block on there, it's like, man, he just played into the Lions. And the 1 block that he didn't really get that great, it was the original screen pass to – there were 2 screen passes to Gabriel. It was the first one, not the one with the play action, scored the touchdown. The first one. But I was like, he didn't do a great job on that. But they got the ball out so quick he didn't.
Definitely. Okay, well, you stole mine. I thought I was going to get – okay, so I'll go with someone different. I'll go with Robert Alford. I think he played well. I think, there's a couple of times where Detroit took some shots on him down the field. Alford has been a little iffy at times in the past defending the deep ball just because he has a tendency to get a little undisciplined, a little get grabby. But he played both the 2 that I'm thinking of in my head, including the one that he got a pick, but it was nullified by Desmond Trufant's holding call. there were two opportunities he had that he played the deep pass pretty perfectly, and I thought that was certainly a positive sign. It's funny to see Trufant be the one that gets all the flags, while Alford is the one who plays a pretty clean game. That's usually the opposite is true. So I'll give Alford a lot of love, particularly on that one where he picked it off in the end zone at the end of the fourth quarter. That was an instance where the Falcons were playing some cover two man, and DeMonte Casey was out there because that was after Ricardo Allen got his concussion. And Casey was a little late adjusting to the deep ball, and that could have been a touchdown if Alford had not played it as well as he had done. Obviously, again, the play was nullified by the penalty or whatnot. But even if that had wound up being a touchdown instead, then that would have been the game-winning play. And I think Alford deserves a lot of credit for sort of playing the deep ball as well as he did. And even though it didn't go to the Falcons' benefit, it certainly could have been to their detriment had he not been there to make that play. All right, let's get into this upcoming Bills matchup. The Falcons obviously are 3-0, undefeated. They're facing the Bills, who are 2-1. But the Bills easily could have been 3-0 had they not, basically they were a dropped pass by their rookie receiver Zay Jones against the Panthers in Week 2 from sort of stealing a win. They didn't play particularly great in that game, but they certainly played. If their offense had gotten a couple of series together, they certainly played a good enough to win that game. So the Bills are definitely no slouch. I think they're currently in first place in the NFC East, or the AFC East, if I'm not mistaken. So this is going to be an interesting matchup. The Bills' defense is the number 1 ranked defense in the league right now in points allowed. They're number 6 in total defense. Obviously, we've got a small sample size, but I think this Bills' defense certainly has enough. Particularly up front. I think this is, we talked about the Bears front seven being, a really good unit, but I think at least as far as the front four goes, maybe not when you factor in the linebackers and the whole front seven, but I think as far as the front four goes, this Bills defensive line, I think, kind of blows away what the Bears had up front. I think it was Akeem Hicks and a couple of other good players, but, Goldman's good and Floyd's okay and Willie Young's pretty good, but I think Jerry Hughes is much better than any of those guys, with the exception of maybe Hicks. And Kyle Williams is really good, and Shaq Lawson, and they picked up Cedric Thornton off the street from Dallas. He was a solid player in Philadelphia. They have Shaq Lawson. They have Lorenzo Alexander, who had like 12, 13 sacks last year. So they have a lot of players up front, and I think, to me, the critical injury for the Falcons potentially that could really sort of determine whether this game is going to be a lot more of the sort of drama that we saw in weeks 1 and 3 and a more of a close game than people expect, or maybe a little bit of a blowout like we saw Week 2 against the Packers, is whether or not Ryan Schrader plays at right tackle. I think he's still in the concussion protocol. He did not practice today on Thursday as we're recording this, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully he gets out of that, because if we got to start Ty Sambrailo and he's forced to go up against Lorenzo Alexander and Shaq Lawson and maybe even Jerry Hughes a couple of times this week, I don't think that's going to be a good thing for the Falcons offense going up against Buffalo.
Yeah, it definitely would not be fun. Hopefully they do what they did this week and they kind of rely on the screen game to slow down that passing attack, though.
Yeah, definitely. And we saw Sark sort of mix in a healthy mix of a variety of screens. He's no Dirk Cutter in terms of throwing the same screen pass at the defense every single time. So yeah, I think we'll see a healthy amount of screens if the pass rush gets a little bit out of hand, and I think the Falcons will rely heavily on their running game to sort of keep the Bills' defensive line from sort of being in a position where they can sort of pin their ears back and try to tee off on Matt Ryan.
I mean, even a couple of the swing passes would be perfect too.
Definitely. Yeah, I hope the Falcons, this will be an interesting test, because I think it'll be an interesting test for the right side of the Falcons' offensive line if Schrader doesn't play, because I think everybody can agree that Schweitzer and Sambrailo haven't necessarily played at a high level that makes you feel confident that they'll go up against an all-pro like Kyle Williams or a guy that had 12 sacks like Lorenzo Alexander last year and win those matchups. So I think it'll be important to see how well those guys fare, but also this will be an important game. If those guys do struggle, we'll be able to know whether or not Sark is able to sort of make the adjustments in the game plan on the fly to sort of mitigate some of those issues if they continue to go into the rest of the season. I'm fairly confident, despite some of my criticisms of Sark early in the year, that he'll be able to make those adjustments. So I feel like even if the Bills' defensive line gets off to a fast start, I think the Falcons should have what it takes to make the adjustments and not let that sort of suck away their offensive performance. But that will be, I think, sort of the key matchup that could either determine whether this is a big win for the Falcons or a very close game that will potentially, maybe have the Bills in a position to win it in the end.
Yeah, I hope it's not a close game at all. But this is not going to be a fun game for the Falcons by any means. The Bills are a good team. They've got a great front seven. I'm not too scared about their secondary, but I do think their front seven's really good. I think Atlanta matches up well with their defense. Their offense, on the other hand, I think that's going to be I actually think that's the easier matchup. Because they're not going to have Cody Glenn, so Deion Dawkins is going to play left tackle for them. Got a lot of injuries up front. I don't think Jordan Mills can really handle Vic Beasley if he's healthy. And if he's not healthy, then we're just going to see a healthy rotation of McKinley and Reed on that side. So I think the Falcons will end up winning this game. It may be a little closer than we realize, but if they win it, 31-24, it can't be that bad.
Yeah, this will be interesting. I think we'll know, what this game is going to be like early in the first quarter. Like if the Falcons get off to a fast start, then it's a wrap for the Bills because they're not really built to be a team that can play from behind. They're run first. Tyrod's not necessarily a let me drop back and throw the ball 30, 35 times plus, and we're going to win that way. The Bills are 1-10 when Tyrod starts and he throws the ball more than 30 times in a game. And so that's not really sort of their brand of football. So I think if the Falcons offense can get off to a fast start, if the Bills defensive line doesn't set the tone early, then I think the Falcons will have the potential to run away with this game. I think you mentioned the Cody Glenn injury. I do expect the Falcons defense to sort of get after Tyrod Taylor. It's going to be tough because the Falcons love playing man coverage. And that's a problem when you play a mobile quarterback like Tyrod, especially a guy like Tyrod who loves to run the ball, who's always going to try to make plays with his legs and is more than capable of extending those plays. And maybe, against with the Bills' lesser receivers, they're going to need Tyrod to be able to run around for 4 or 5 or 6 seconds in order to get them opportunities to create that separation because simply put, they're not really good enough as a receiver group to go up against guys like Alfred and Trufant and get open. So it'll be important for the Falcons pass rush to really keep Tyrod contained. And I think if they can sort of take advantage of the injury to Cody Glenn with Deion Dawkins at left tackle, Jordan Mills is a bad right tackle. He's probably one of the worst starting right tackles in the NFL, although maybe that's an exaggeration because there's a lot of bad starting right tackles in the NFL this year. And so, that will free up maybe our linebackers to at least be able to play a little bit more man coverage to handle Shady McCoy. But if not, then I think the Falcons certainly have the speed at the linebacker position that if they're going to drop those guys in the zone, one of those guys, probably Deion Jones, will be asked to spy Tyrod a lot. And I think the Falcons have what it takes to sort of keep the Bills' offense contained. But it's just, the Bills basically want to make this a low-scoring game. They want to win this game like 24-23. And, it's not just on the Falcons defense to get those stops, but it's on the Falcons offense to make this a 31 sort of, 23 sort of game or whatever the case may be. And if that's the case, I think the Falcons should be relatively comfortable in winning this game. Okay, let's see. Okay, we got a question from Evan Birchfield. Aside from McCoy, who should the Falcons worry about on the Bills?
Ooh. No, I know you want to say Charles Clay, Brian, but I honestly would say Zay Jones. I think he's your best offensive player outside of LaShawn McCoy. then I'd give it to Clay. But there's not really a lot of guys that you're really too scared of. I think Jordan Matthews is a good wide receiver. He may get his yards and his 5 catches for 80 yards, but I just don't see a guy that's like, oh my God, I'm scared of this guy. I think Trufant could take out Jordan Matthews or Zay Jones. I think Alford could take out the other. I think Poole can handle whoever's in the slot between Holmes or Tate or Clay. I mean, I'm not too worried about that. Clay is okay. I think Devondre Campbell could handle him man-to-man pretty easily. I think Duke Riley could handle him man-to-man pretty easily. Nick O'Leary doesn't scare anybody. He's slower than I am at 40. Like, none of these guys are super scary. Mike Pope, it's a saying, right?
I want to see that happen.
Let's not think. But I'm just saying he runs like a 5-flat 40. Mine's not too far off.
Yeah. There you go.
I'm just putting it out. All right.
I don't know what to say to this, guys. You guys got any more to say about people's 40 times?
I'm not too scared about the. I'm not too scared about what they've got on offense or defense. Just a pure matchup outside of their front seven. Like, even in coverage, I'm not really scared of their front seven. I think that's where Atlanta wins this game. Because I don't think Preston Brown or Ramon Humbert can really handle what the Falcons have coming out the back.
Okay. Well, to the listeners, that's our producer Brian, a big Bills fan. So obviously he was not going to let us go this game without saying something. To answer Evan's question, and then maybe we can give the floor to Brian to explain who he thinks the Falcons should be afraid of. I'm not really afraid of anybody on the Bills offense other than Tyrod Taylor. Shady is good, but I don't see him taking over this game to the degree that he needs to in order for them to win. I think the way the Bills win this game is, again, it's, to me, the thing I'm most worried about with the Bills is their front, the defensive line, their pass rush. They have a really good pass rush. It's the best pass rush the Falcons have faced all year long. And again, if Schrader doesn't play, that could be a problem. But I think Tyrod is really the only thing on the offense. He has to play well. It's going to be Tyrod sort of extending plays. Like, the Falcons love playing man coverage on third downs. And if they continue that, they play almost exclusively man coverage on third downs. So it'll be a big question to me to see if they continue that this week. And if you do that, then you run the risk of Tyrod basically, you get into these 3rd and 8s, Tyrod breaks contain, and then he uses his legs and converts. And all of a sudden, they can string together some long drives that I think will do more to keep the Falcons offense off the field than really Shady McCoy running buck wild over the Falcons defense. So I think Tyrod, to me, is the only thing that worries me about the Bills, at least on the offensive side of the ball. I feel reasonably confident that the Falcons pass rush will be able to sort of put the pressure on him, as we talked about with the Bills sort of question marks at offensive tackle. But if I'm worried about anything, it's going to be those 3rd and 8s where Tyrod just basically decides he's going to scramble for 9 yards and just keep the chains moving. And the Falcons, and then string together some 10, 15 play drives that wind up, putting points on the board at the end. And that to me is the one thing I'm worried about. All right, Brian, explain to the people why Charles Clay is the guy that we should be scared of.
Bray's pretty good. I do like Worthy.
Okay.
I mean, we all talk about McDermott's familiarity and all that, but do we forget last year that Ryan threw for 500 yards against them in the first matchup? And even
I
after
hope he
he had
does.
time, Ryan dropped another 30 burger on him. And, he had 277 with 2 touchdowns. Didn't throw a pick against them all game, or threw 1 pick against them, and that was it. Like, I think McDermott's a good coach. I think he's a smart defensive guy, but Atlanta scored, 33 and 46, 79 points against them last year. Sorry, 81 points. Do you have a guy who can stick with Julio Jones?
Okay. Yeah, EJ Games has played well, but he's going to be asked to play, zone coverage. Hopefully, he won't. Sean McDermott learned from that mistake last year when Julio put up 300 yards against Ben Wickery and won't sort of ask EJ to sort of have to man up against Julio, because I think that's going to be an area where the Falcons going to feast. So I think he's the Bills secondary has played well. There's no doubt about that. I think the Falcons are sort of a unique challenge, and so we'll see how well they handle themselves this week. Okay, we'll see what happens. All right, let's get to the call outs of the week. I honestly don't have one this week. I would call out all the anthem stuff, but I already blew my wad on that. I think I used that 2 weeks ago, so I won't sort of repeat it. But Scott, please, who are you calling out this week?
Just the hypocrisy right now. Just Trump calling players sons of bitches, like, that's fucking uncalled for. Like, pardon my language, but that's just uncalled for. You call them sons of bitches, but you don't call white supremacists sons of bitches? Come on, man. We see what side you're on. We see who you're going for. And it's not the right one. And history is not going to look down on him very well at all. And whenever he gets out of office, whether it's 2020 or 2024, or whether he gets impeached and he's pulled out, it can't be too soon. And I know I'm sure we have some conservatives that watch the show. It's not a personal thing. I got nothing against y'all. Y'all are fine. I can't stand this shit gibbon that's in the White House. There's my voice.
There you go. Strong words, Scott Karasik. I actually agree with them. So, all right, but direct your hatred towards Scott this week. You can save yours for me next week when I say something about Muhammad Sanu or something. Apparently, we're some people are saying that they can't hear you, Brian. So it just sounds like we're talking to a random person. All right. So, okay, there you go, guys. Let's get into the. You'll hear what Brian said on the iTunes feed. So, all right, let's get into the rest of the mailbag questions. The first one comes from Derek Hunter at D-Rock the Party. He asks, on one of the punts against Detroit, I saw Allen was the personal protector. If he misses next week, who might be the next man up? I think this would be interesting because it was the expectation going into the game. I thought was with Brian Hill being active for the first time, he would get that opportunity because it was basically him and Teron Ward splitting those reps during the preseason. Teron Ward was the personal protector on punts for the first two games, and he was out last week. If Allen is out, then I would suspect it'll either be Brian Hill, since Ward is probably going to miss this week's game as well, or it's going to be Sherrod Neesman. Those are the two guys that have worked there at that personal protector role. Neesman got some reps there last summer, and Hill obviously got some reps there this summer. So I think Neesman will probably definitely be active, especially if Allen is out. So it's probably more likely to be him, but maybe it's possibly Brian Hill. We'll see. All right, there's your special teams question of the week. All right, Evan Birchfield asks, Falcons wearing the throwback jerseys this weekend like last year. I got me thinking, who would you like to see new uniforms? If so, what?
Give me the black on black from years ago that we haven't had in forever. That's what I want to see. I want to see those uniforms at a minimum, just as a throwback, like a alternate. Now, if there were like all new uniforms, I may get some flack for this, but I wouldn't mind seeing some gold thrown in there as part of like an Atlanta. Just hear me out.
Okay, I'm curious now.
An overall Atlanta color scheme, right? Atlanta United is red, black, gold. The football or the basketball team, the Hawks, they're red, black, weird yellow, white. The baseball team, the Braves, they're always going to be red, blue, white. No black, whatever. That's fun. Why not have the three main teams in this stadium, in that area, all play right next to each other, have the same colors? That way you can wear one team's colors to the other team's game, and no one's gonna be like, "Oh, dude, you're in the wrong color." No, they'll wear red, black, white. No big deal. Now, I don't think it should be a main color. It's like it's not five stripes, an accent, but why not instead of gray around it all?
Okay.
So.
All right. I mean, I think new uniforms are probably come. Like they got these current uniforms. Like in 2003, 2004, somewhere around then. So like I imagine, that means these current uniforms are almost 15 years old. So I imagine they'll probably get an update soon, now that they've moved into a new stadium and they can sort of brand it as it's a brand new era of Atlanta football and whatnot, and we'll see. So probably next year or two, I suspect we'll get new uniforms. I know when they switched to these uniforms, I didn't really like them. They looked a lot like the Texans uniforms, and I was like, why are we just subbed out the navy blue for the black? But they, as always, uniforms always grow on you. Like you look at them, you're like, that's dumb, or sometimes you do, and then eventually you just get used to it. So.
If you ever want to just see a new Falcons concept, there's about 100 of them on this forum. Look up Chris Creamer Sports Logos. He's got all the logos historically throughout the years. The Falcons are one of the most common ones that they do logo and concepts on. Just search Atlanta Falcons concept. You will find a ton of different. And just if you like one, share it on Twitter. Be like, what do you think of this one? And it'd be worth looking.
Yeah. I liked seeing the throwbacks. I was tired of the black with the red helmets. So it was just like, yeah, it's cool, but it's like, whatever. I don't care. We've been doing that for, a decade plus. So I've seen the 90s era. I would prefer if they had the silver pants Or obviously, I would prefer if they had the black pants, but for some reason, the Falcons just refuse to go back to the black on black. But white pants is fine. I like the old school. Terrence Mathis, too legit silver pants. That would have been really cool. But I'm always going to be. I'm always that sort of angry, bitter guy. So even if they change the uniforms, there's like probably a 60% chance I'm not going to like it. But it is what it is. So like, if they change the uniforms, great. If they don't, whatever. I just, as long as they go black on black, black pants, black jerseys, I'll be happy. If they could do that once a year, I'll be happy. Yeah. All right. Evan Birchfield asks, through first 3 games, how do you think Julio is being used in the offense? Red zone? ?
Not very well in terms of the red zone. In the offense, it's been fine, but just the red zone. Julio's been kind of an afterthought in the red zone. It's just been kind of decoying him out there and going elsewhere. So I don't really know what to do.
Yeah, he only has like 1 red zone target, right? It was like a fade or something like that they threw to him.
He had like a weird kind of fade, not really a fade. Just tough to explain. He didn't really have a target. Wasn't really the right fit for what you would think he could do. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Scott's right. He hasn't been a major factor in the red zone. The Falcons have primarily, unless I'm misremembering, primarily when they get in the red zone, they run the ball and mix in a couple of passes. But for the most part, it's been run, because Devontae Freeman's on Steve Sarkisian's fantasy team. He's got to get those points. But other than that, I think Julio's been integrated well in the offense. Not necessarily week 1, but ever since then, they certainly have made a strong effort to get him involved early and often, which I think is exactly how you want to do. I suspect that we will find out just how good E.J. Gaines is very early in this game, because probably the first pass Matt Ryan throws will be a pass to Julio Jones. So he'll get some opportunities to make some plays, both Jones and Gaines, probably at the opening drive. So we'll see what happens.
It'd be nice to see the Falcons score more than just, 3 touchdowns in a game. As of right now in the red zone, they've got 3 running touchdowns, all with Devontae Freeman. They've got 3 passing touchdowns, 1 to Devontae Freeman. The other 2, one's Mohamed Sanu, one's Tevin Coleman. They've got 4 running touchdowns, 4 passing touchdowns. All the runs are Devontae, all the passes are Coleman or Sanu. So it's not like they're really doing it.
Okay. All right, we got another question from Evan Birchfield. He says, with the Bills game being in the final game before the bye week, how would you rate this season so far on a 1 to 10 scale?
I'd say a 7. I know they're 3-0 and it's great, and that's what they need to be, but I don't think they're playing to their potential. I think they're a better team than what we've seen on the field. The results have shown. I think they could have beat the Bears probably by 2 more touchdowns. I think they definitely could have waxed the Lions' ass, just fucking destroyed them. But they didn't, because they turned the ball over too much, or they were a little rusty versus the Bears, which you're going to expect that in the first game of the year. But I think as they get closer to midseason form, we're going to see a couple 40 burgers dropped on people. We're going to see the defense step up and allow just 17, 18 points. And people are going to go, man, this defense looks good. They're only allowing 17 points. Man, this offense is crazy. This might be the best team in the league. It's going to be tough.
All right. Here's a shot, guys. I'm actually going to come in with a higher number than Scott is. This is the first time ever. I'm going to go with an 8.5. I think this season has gone really well. I know the Falcons, I don't disagree with what Scott said. I think the Falcons could have potentially played better in some of these games. But I think in terms of what they needed to do coming into the season, they needed the defense to sort of step up and win them some games. They technically had the defense win them 2 games. Certainly the Bears game, defense really came through in that one. In the Lions game, I think as well, particularly getting some stops after the offense turned the ball over. I think the offense, after a rocky first game, I think they really got their thing going and getting back in the groove. Obviously, they made some mistakes last week. They weren't perfect last week. But I think it's better to sort of start the season, a little rusty. And even when you're a little rusty, you're still capable of putting up 30-plus points. I think that's a very positive sign. So far through 3 games, I'm very pleased with where this team is at. They're certainly not perfect by any means, but I think this season has started out right where they wanted it to be. They're getting a lot of good shots from their opponents. They knew that coming into the season because they were the defending NFC champions, and that I think they've shown some resiliency, as Dan Quinn might say, the ability to respond to some adversity really well, and I think that's a bonus for them. So I'll go with an 8.5. All right, Falcons Fury at South Life Gold. He says, will we see the running back in the passing game more? I feel like that part of the offense has been put on the back burner. And also, what about 26? That's Tevin Coleman in the slot.
I think they've been slowly pulling the wrinkles away for now, and they're going to add them as they go. So we're going to see a little bit more of that in the slot. We're going to see a good bit. We're going to see a lot of what's going on. So we're going to see what 26 really does in the slot. We're going to see what happens when we put Hooper in the slot. We're going to see what happens when Hooper's outside. We're going to see what happens when we've got Coleman playing outside. We're going to see what happens when we put Freeman playing outside. They're just going to see. There's so many looks that they haven't had the time on offense to show. I mean, how many snaps has the offense played this year? 50 at most. Most of what they've been doing is playing defense or running. So I don't think we've got anything close to what this offense is really like by the end.
Okay. I don't think the running backs have not been involved. Like I think we haven't sort of seen, the sort of the classic of Tevin Coleman split out wide running a 40-yard post route. But, combined Coleman and Freeman's numbers, about the same number of targets that Sanu has this year, same number of catches, almost the same number of yards that Gabriel has, same number of touchdowns. So I feel like both of those guys are contributing. It's just maybe not the big sort of highlight reel plays that I guess people got accustomed to seeing last year. But then again, when you think about it, like after that Denver game, Tevin Coleman wasn't a big time playmaker for the Falcons. Like teams made adjustments. They're like, oh God, this guy's going to kill us. Let's not let him kill us. And I think he had like 1 or 2 20 or 30-plus yard plays after that Week 5 game for the rest of the season. So I think the running backs have been fine. We've seen Coleman in the slot. He just hasn't gotten all the targets. I think that's part of the problem with this offense. They have an abundance of weapons. And so it seems like guys like Hooper and maybe the running backs and certainly Justin Hardy and Gabriel at times and Julio and sometimes Sanu, sometimes these guys go by the back burner because there's so many weapons that Matt Ryan to throw to. And when he's trying to spread the ball around, it's hard to evenly distribute it, when you're throwing the ball, 35 times and you're averaging, 20, 22 completions per game. It's hard for everybody to be involved at all times. And so some guys are going to feel underutilized, and maybe a couple of times it's the running back. So I don't think it's a major concern right now. I think this is a side effect of having too many good players that it seems like certain guys aren't being utilized to their full potential. All right, Luke at the Dirty Bird 1998. How do you feel Brian Poole has done through 3 games? Seems like he's really improved his man coverage from last year.
His man coverage is tremendous this year. But honestly, it's his zone and some of his freelancing that's really helped out the Falcons. Without his freelancing on the final play of the game last week, Atlanta doesn't win. There's no way that they win. Because he's the one that said, oh, hey, they're going to run an underneath route here. Even though this isn't my man, I'm going to jump down and knock this guy on his ass. Because otherwise he's going to get the end. He won it. He won the game right at the end. So, yeah, his man coverage is good. Everything else has gotten better. He's an excellent corner. And that's not just because he's a friend of the show. Like, he's looked good. And he's been blitzing like crazy. I don't know about you, but there's something about seeing a safety slash corner blitz that just gets me happy because you get to see a guy come in and just fly at a quarterback that you're not expecting to see. To play, and it might just be because I always would make myself as a safety in Madden, and I would just blitz myself every play, knock the crap out of the quarterback every single play. But that is what it is. Like, he's basically what I would create. He's fast off the edge. He likes to hit people. He's a safety.
Okay. Yeah, I think Brian Poole has looked better in man coverage this year. He's still, the problem is he plays alongside Robert Alford and Desmond Trufant. So you're going to see him get, quarterbacks are going to have a tendency to try to pick on him a little bit more just because of the quality of the guys on the outside. So we'll probably see that against Buffalo this week. Jordan Matthews typically plays in the slot when they go three wide. I certainly, Andre Holmes, I think, usually lines up on Trufant's side of the field. And Zay Jones, I think, normally will line up on Alford's side of the field. I don't expect either of those guys to, if they catch more than 3 combined passes in this game, I will be shocked. So I think if the Bills are going to throw the ball, it's going to be a lot of Charles Clay. It's going to be a lot of Jordan Matthews, a lot of checkdowns to the running back. I think actually McCoy is their leading guy in terms of targets. So I think Poole has played well. He struggled a little bit against Matthews last year. And so, that was about the time of the season when the Falcons started shifting more to a man-heavy scheme. And that became a little bit of an issue down the stretch. It hasn't really been an issue this year. Golden Tate got the better of him a couple of times last week, but that was to be expected, and certainly not to the degree. Yeah, not to the degree where it became a really major issue for the Falcons. And that was probably the one concern I had going into the game with the Lions offense. I was worried that, we could see a big game from Golden Tate where he made Poole look like amateur hour, and that was not the case at all. So I think that's a testament to Poole's improvement in play, and Scott mentioned as well his ability as a blitzer. His tackling has been superb. So he's really sort of shown that he's really been a solid all-around nickel corner. Against those high level slots like Golden Tate, yeah, he'll probably get beat probably a few too many times than we would prefer. But I think, one of the questions with Jalen Collins being suspended was whether Brian Poole was going to be poised to step up and be that guy in man coverage that the Falcons could trust, given all the man coverage they like to play. And I think he's certainly done that so far this season. All right. I think our last question comes from Derek Hunter at D-Rock the Party. He has thoughts on this stat, and he posted a link to a tweet. And it's from Sharp Football, runs a good site at Sharp Football Stats. He posted an image about how dominant Atlanta was over Detroit. Basically, how bad was Detroit? It says teams with at least +3 in turnover margin and at least 1 return touchdown margin since 2011 are 124-3 in the NFL. That means they've won 98% of the games. Atlanta just made it 124-4. So essentially what that stat is saying, that based off of that stat alone, the Falcons should have lost this game. They had about a 2% chance of winning the game, and they won the game. So that's a testament to sort of how resilient the Falcons proved to be against Detroit.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say other than you summed it up with they were just resilient, and they shouldn't have won that game. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't think that they did win that game until I saw that Golden Tate was down, and I was like, all right, well, then we're good. So Falcons won, and yeah, I didn't think that they won the game until right at the end when they saw that the review had overturned and there was a runoff. Like, without that, I don't see a way that Atlanta wins that game.
Yep. There you go, Scott. You're right. They outplayed the Lions for most of that game, but they made some critical mistakes and gave the Lions plenty of opportunities to sort of steal a win. And it looked like the Lions did. And fortunately for the Falcons, they did not. Unfortunately for the Lions, they that's the way the cookie crumbles. So That's it, guys. We appreciate everybody that tuned in. Sorry that we had to reschedule the show from Tuesday. Hopefully that won't happen again. But we'll be back next Tuesday, possibly with a guest star. I think you guys might want to tune into that. If you want to send in your questions, your Falcons mailbag questions, use the hashtag Falcons mailbag. Send them to the show's Twitter handle. That's at Falcons PFC. Scott and I are also on Twitter. I am at FalcFan. Scott is at Karasik S. You can check out our stuff at falcfans.com as well as the Falcons Wire at usatoday.com. You can also find out all the information in our archives on profootballcentral.com. If you're one of those people that listen to us regularly on iTunes, but you haven't been able to find the updated show link, that is at profootballcentral.com. Just click on any of the articles titled Falcon Central Radio, and you will find a link to that iTunes feed. So you should be able to listen to this show on iTunes. Also, give us a like on Pro Football Central on YouTube. Thumbs up for the video if you check us out there. As usual, we're on Facebook. Like our page, Falcon Central Radio, on Facebook. And that's it, guys. We will see you next Tuesday to talk about this Bills game and maybe talk about what we're going to do with the week off.